Nia sat outside her mother's hut, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep orange and purple. The evening breeze rustled the dry grass, but it did nothing to ease the storm brewing in her heart. She was only 17, a black African girl with deep brown skin and thick, coiled black hair that she kept tied in a loose scarf. Her large, dark eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she traced patterns in the dust with her finger. Her mother, Zubida, stood in the doorway, watching her. Zubida was a black African woman with dark, wrinkled skin and a bony face that spoke of years of hardship. Her once thick hair, now streaked with gray, was wrapped in a dull cloth. She was thinner than she had ever been, her frame fragile like a reed about to snap. "We have no choice, Nia," Zubida finally spoke, her voice firm but hollow. "Chief Baraka has offered more silver than we will ever see in our lifetime." Nia's fingers froze against the dirt. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum of war. "You are selling me to him?" Zubida flinched, turning her gaze away. "It is not selling. It is a marriage arrangement." "Marriage?" Nia scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "He is old enough to be my grandfather, Mama. You know what people say about him, he is cruel, he treats his wives like slaves." Zubida clenched her fists, her thin shoulders trembling. "I do this for us. For your brothers, for our survival." Nia knew her mother's struggle. Their family had nothing. No land. No livestock. Her younger brothers often went to bed hungry. But how could her mother do this? How could she trade her for silver, as if she were a goat in the marketplace? That evening, when Chief Baraka arrived, Nia felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. Chief Baraka was a black African man in his late 50s, his skin as dark as the night sky, his beard thick and streaked with gray. He was large, his belly rounded from years of feasting while others starved. His robes were made of the finest gold-threaded fabric, his fingers heavy with rings that gleamed in the firelight. His eyes, small and calculating, traveled over Nia like she was a piece of merchandise. "She is pleasing," he said, his thick lips curling into a smile. "She will make a fine wife." Nia's stomach turned. She wanted to run, to scream, to disappear into the darkness. But when she looked at her mother, she saw only defeat in her tired eyes. The silver was handed over in a heavy leather pouch. And just like that, Nia's fate was sealed. As Baraka's guards led her away, she cast one last glance at her mother. Zubida did not meet her eyes. Tears streamed down Nia's cheeks as she stepped into a future she did not choose. The journey to Chief Baraka's compound was long, the dusty road stretching endlessly before Nia. She sat in the back of a wooden cart, flanked by 2 guards. They were black African men with dark skin, clad in matching brown tunics, their faces hardened from years of service. They did not speak to her. Her heart pounded with each turn of the wheels. She had heard stories of Baraka's home, a grand estate with towering walls, designed not just to keep people out but to keep them trapped within. When they arrived, the sight before her was breathtaking yet suffocating. The compound was enormous, its high walls painted in bright reds and yellows. Intricate carvings of warriors and animals adorned the entrance gates. Beyond them, Baraka's many wives and servants moved about, their silk garments flowing in the evening wind. Nia was led into the main hall, her bare feet sinking into a thick woven rug. The air smelled of roasted meat and burning incense, but there was no warmth here, only power and control. Seated on a raised throne-like chair, Chief Baraka watched her with an amused expression. His heavy robes shimmered in the firelight, his wide fingers tapping against the wooden armrest. A woman stepped forward. Asha, Baraka's first wife, was a black African woman of striking beauty, her smooth brown skin flawless, her almond-shaped eyes sharp with authority. Her thick, black braids were adorned with golden beads, and she wore a deep green silk dress that clung to her tall, slender frame. "This is the girl?" Asha asked, her lips curving into a smirk. "She is," Baraka replied, standing and approaching Nia. He reached out, gripping her chin firmly, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You belong to me now." Nia swallowed her fear, but her body stiffened under his touch. Her nightmare had begun. The days that followed were filled with torment. Baraka dictated everything, what she wore, when she ate, when she could speak. Her new garments were made of the finest fabrics, but they felt like chains. When she displeased him, he locked her in a windowless room. The darkness became her only companion. Asha and the other wives did nothing to help her. Some pitied her, others saw her as competition. One evening, after Nia refused to kneel before Baraka, he struck her across the face. The sting burned, but the fire in her heart burned hotter. That night, as she lay on the cold floor, her cheeks swollen, she whispered to herself, "I must escape." Nia waited until the compound fell silent. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, giving her the cover of darkness. Dressed in a plain brown wrapper, she crept through the corridors, her breath shallow. She knew the guards' routines, had memorized their shifts. She had spent weeks watching, waiting. She slipped past the sleeping quarters, past the kitchen where the scent of dried fish still lingered. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest as she reached the outer wall. Climbing onto a stack of wooden crates, she hoisted herself up. Her fingers scraped against the rough stone, her arms trembling with effort. Just as she swung her leg over the wall, she heard footsteps. A voice called out, "Stop!" Panic surged through her. Without thinking, she jumped. The fall knocked the wind from her lungs. Pain exploded in her ankle, but she forced herself to stand. The guards shouted behind her. She ran. The night swallowed her as she disappeared into the dense forest, the trees whispering secrets in the wind. She ran until her legs gave out, until her lungs ached for air. When she collapsed near a riverbank, her body trembling with exhaustion, she wept, not just from fear, but from relief. She was free. But she was also alone. The days in the wilderness tested Nia's strength. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and exhaustion made her limbs heavy. She had escaped Baraka's clutches, but freedom came at a cost. Alone in the dense forest, she fought against despair. She foraged what little she could, bitter roots, small berries she hoped were safe. The nights were the worst. The forest whispered with unseen dangers, rustling leaves carrying the sounds of creatures she could not see. Sleep came in restless fragments, her body curled under the thick roots of an ancient baobab tree. On the third day, her strength began to fail. Her legs trembled beneath her as she walked. The edges of her vision darkened. Then, through the haze, she saw it, smoke rising in the distance. A village. With the last of her energy, she staggered forward. Each step felt like a battle. The huts came into focus, mud walls, thatched roofs, the scent of cooking fires in the air. But before she could cry out for help, her knees buckled, and she collapsed into the dust. The last thing she saw was a figure rushing toward her. A woman's voice called out, full of concern. Then, everything went dark. When Nia awoke, she was lying on a soft mat inside a small, dimly lit hut. A warm blanket covered her, and the scent of healing herbs filled the air. She turned her head, wincing at the soreness in her body. Beside her sat an older woman, her dark skin wrinkled with age, her black eyes filled with kindness. She wore a bright red head wrap, and her simple blue dress was well kept, though faded from years of wear. "You are awake," the woman said, relief in her voice. Nia's throat was dry. "Where am I?" "In my home, child. You were found at the village entrance, barely breathing." The woman pressed a cool cloth to Nia's forehead. "I am Mama Fatima." A rush of emotion flooded Nia, gratitude, fear, exhaustion. Thank you. Mama Fatima nodded. Rest now. You are safe here. In the weeks that followed, Nia slowly regained her strength. Mama Fatima cared for her like a daughter, feeding her nourishing soups and teaching her how to weave baskets. For the first time in years, Nia felt warmth, not just from the sun, but from the people around her. She met Jengo, a black African man with smooth, ebony skin and strong arms from years of farming. His hair was cropped short, his jawline sharp, and his deep brown eyes carried a quiet strength. He had been the one to find her at the village entrance. You are strong, he told her one evening as they sat by the fire. Stronger than you think. Nia smiled faintly. She wasn't sure if she believed that yet. But for the first time in a long while, she wanted to. Just as she began to settle into her new life, darkness crept back in. One evening, a traveler arrived in the village. His news sent a shiver down Nia's spine. Chief Baraka was searching for a runaway girl. And he would not stop until he found her. Nia's heart pounded as she listened to the traveler's words. She had known, deep down, that Baraka would not let her go so easily. Men like him did not accept defiance. Jengo found her by the river later that night, her hands gripping the edge of her woven basket, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I have to leave, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He frowned. No. She turned to him, desperation in her eyes. You don't understand. He will come. He will take me back. Jengo placed a strong hand on her shoulder. We will not let that happen. The next morning, Mama Fatima called a village meeting. The people gathered around, their faces filled with concern. The news of Baraka's search had spread quickly. We will not turn our backs on one of our own, Mama Fatima declared. Her voice, though old, carried unwavering strength. We stand together. The men of the village sharpened their spears, their dark hands steady with determination. Women carried wooden clubs and farming tools, ready to fight. Even the children watched with wide, solemn eyes, understanding that their village was about to be tested. By midday, the sound of approaching horses filled the air. Dust rose from the earth as Baraka's men entered the village. There were 6 of them, all black African warriors with dark skin and cold, merciless eyes. They wore deep red robes, their hands resting on the hilts of their blades. One of them, a tall man with scars on his face, stepped forward. His voice was thick with arrogance. We are here for the girl. Mama Fatima did not move. There is no girl here for you. The warrior sneered. Do not defy Chief Baraka. His gaze swept the crowd until it landed on Nia. His lips curled into a cruel smile. There you are. Jengo stepped in front of her. She does not belong to him. The warrior drew his sword. Then you will die protecting her. The village erupted into chaos. The warriors lunged, but the villagers were ready. Jengo swung his spear, knocking a man to the ground. A farmer struck another with a wooden staff. Mama Fatima, despite her age, flung a handful of ground pepper into the eyes of a warrior, making him howl in pain. Nia, though terrified, refused to be helpless. She grabbed a large stone and hurled it at one of Baraka's men, striking him hard across the temple. He crumpled to the ground. Within minutes, the warriors realized they were outnumbered. They had expected a weak village, not one filled with fighters. Defeated, they turned and fled, disappearing into the trees. The village stood victorious. Nia trembled as she looked around, her chest heaving. She had thought she would have to run again. But this time, she had a home that fought for her. She turned to Jengo, tears brimming in her eyes. I want to stay. Mama Fatima smiled, wrapping an arm around her. Then stay, my child. Here, you are one of us. For the first time in her life, Nia truly believed it. She was no longer a girl sold for silver. She was free. And she would never be caged again.